profile, and this is my wargaming for November 20th, Thursday, 2025. And it doesn't look like that's going to work, so we're going to switch to this. Let me share a screen. There we go. All right, starting off, right, we're trying to see, like, we came up, gapped up. We're trying to see, do we close above today, this NFP Friday and previous month 50%? If that's the case, then we expect 30% green days. 70% green days, 30% red days. We know that we'll have the edge of knowing, look for low days from 1800 to 1900, 03 to 04, or 0930 to 1030. We'll expect end of day closes. If we cannot do that, then we start closing back below here again. Then we anticipate quarterly lows and 50% green days, 50% red days, right? Going over to candle science, this figure out what it says. We are going to use, right? We're going to use Wednesdays and Tuesdays price on the daily candle. We're selecting NQ, daily, right? Last three candles, and we're going to figure out what the probabilities of this is. We can see that Tuesday was red, Wednesday took out the high and was green. So let's see what the probability is. Since we already took out this day's high, we're going to see, is the close going to support continuation or reversal? So C1 is red, C2 is green, C2 took out the high, but closed above the close price, C1's close price. All right, and then we can come up here and we can see that there was a 74% probability that we took out previous day high. Check, we did that due to NVIDIA earnings, right? And overnight. But we can also see that there's a 59% probability that we close below it, right? Which is actually very, very low, right? So this could be one of those days that we stay above the previous day high and close above it, because usually this is a higher probability than that, right? We can see that there's an 80% chance that we don't take out previous day low, and we don't take out previous day opening price, and that we close above them, definitely. And, you know, let me check. This is all new information. We can see that we close above the low, 91%, close above the previous day close is 54. So 54 and 59. So 54 for closing above previous day close price, and 59% that we close below previous day high, right? So because this is a very, very low probability for closing below, like, we're going to anticipate it to close higher. All right, let's add some more. Let's take that off. And yeah, it doesn't mess with the probabilities too much, right? All right, so, right, we know that right now bullish momentum's up, right? We expected that reversal anyway based off of how this happened yesterday. All right, so moving on to the weekly chart. Weekly chart, we can see right here that there's still a 82% probability at this level, and there's a 76% probability right here. So there's still probabilities to the upside. We got our typical Wednesday return to Sunday price like statistic that we use, and that has come back, and that was fulfilled yesterday. So now we're trying to see, is the day going to get us to these 82 and 76% probability that is on the weekly chart? We can see from a weekly candle perspective, right? We're kind of smack dab in the middle, right? So we need to pay attention to how today goes, and, you know, what the New York 1 is pointing us towards. We know that the distribution of the weekly candle is higher probability to happen on Friday. But right now, we're trying to see, do we reject from here, right now, which is definitely a probability, or do we take this high out, making this the low of the week, and then we can anticipate Thursday and Friday to be a buy the dip scenario. All right, moving on to the daily profile, right? We can see that during the 6 to 8:30, we stayed in the upper half of the P12, right? We can see that right here from a 12-hour MAE MFE that we typically put the MAE in by 8:30 to 8:45. So as we're speaking right now, this could be the high of the day, right? We can see that there's definitely data from 9:30 to 10:15 for that we can take this high out, but the most common, the mode and the median lies between 8:30 and 8:45. So if we start seeing a reversal here, right, we can trust it, right? And then we would expect that this 90% level, this 80% level, this 60% level, and this 50% level to start getting targeted. All right, so right now we don't have London OU or Asia OU. They've both been broken, right? So those aren't probabilities. We know this P12 low, mid has been broken. So looking over markets, we can see that it was a contradicting market, right? Asia took it up, London took it down, right? And so when that happens, statistically, more so than not, doesn't mean it won't happen or will happen, but more so than not, we can expect high day and low day after RTH, right? Because the day was a heavy news catalyst, we're trying to see right now, can it start picking up trend based off of that news, or is it going to plant the high and then reverse the trend, right? Coming over to our data, right? Let's go to the daily profile. All right, let's go to this daily profile, right? And put in the information of what we had, right? So far we see that Asia was long true broken, London was short true broken, and we went long out of the 7:30 to 8:30 box that we measured data from right here. Right, we can see that 67% of the time it does go false. During that 67% of the time, it points to the major pivot with the high of the day happening between 9:30 and 9:45, but we do have data towards the 70th percentile, right, at 9:45 to 10 and 10 to 10:15. So this one has a little bit more data than usual between 9:45 and 10:15. So we can expect that that major pivot primarily happens between 9:30 and 9:45, but there is data to support a 9:45 reversal or a 10 to 10:15 sweeper followed by a reversal, right? So we put false right here. We can see, we're coming to look at our high of the day, low of the day, right? We can see that we love putting, we've got the filled goal posts all in the RTH, right? We either put the low of the day in and then between 9:30 and 10:30, or actually 9:30 to 10:15, or and then put the high of the day in, or we do the higher probability move, which is put the high of the day in between 9:45 and 10:15, and then come put a new end of day low day in, right? Based off of where price is right now, right? We're 1% to the upside, so we're going to expect this one, right? Where we put the high of the day in, and then we put in the beginning of the market, and then low of the day towards the end, right? If we go with the other scenario, and then if that's the case, right, coming to our levels, right, we can start with settlement, right? It's a Thursday. We can expect 25% of the gap fill to happen, 50% of the gap fill to happen, 75 to happen, and then the gap fill to happen. If we can do the 4-step reversal at 9:30, we can definitely expect gap fill, right? That's on Thursdays. If you look at it all, it's still a high probability for Thursday. We can see that Globex Open has a high probability of being returned to between the hours of 8 and 11:30, primarily between 9:30 and 10:30. Settlement, same thing, high probability, right, under these conditions. And then midnight open, 9:30 to 10:30, right? Looking at where those are on the chart, we've got midnight open there, so check. We've got Globex open right here, so check. This is going to be the one that's sus, right? Use your on market open, fib it out for 25, 50, 75%, and that way you have an anchoring point to know what probabilities are out there. All right, so now we're going to go and look at the P12 analysis, right? There's more probability. We've hit the high, which was lower probability, and we've hit the mid, right? Now we're going to see if we can get below 9:30, can we come touch this P12 low, right? Which is currently all the way down here by Globex Open, right? So you're starting to get stacking probabilities. Now the live price component will tell us to expect any of this, right? It will tell us that because let's say that this is the 9:30 price, and this is the 9 o'clock hour, right? If we get above 9:30 price and can't get back below it, we know that everything I just went over is not to be true, that we are going to expect a long true and not even be able to take out the 7:30 to 8:30 low, right? So we will look for the 4-step reversal, and if you went through the boot camp, you know what that is, between 9:30 and 10:15, right? Which will dismiss all these probabilities to the downside, and then we'll come do that gap fill tomorrow or the next day or next week or next month or whenever, right? Because current RTH gap is over 300 handles. So let's look at distributions, right? So we look at the 10-day median range. We know that currently VVIX is in a state of expansion, meaning that we're expecting the current market to give us bigger ranges than normal, right? If we look at the daily chart, this closed day, VVIX normally likes to cluster, right, between a 200 to 300 handle range on the NQ, and then it likes to spike up to put high of week, high of month, high of quarter in, or low of month, low of week, low of quarter in, and then it returns back to normal state, right? Right now, we're not near a time where we typically put a low of quarter, low of week, or low of month in, so this might be actual volatility expanding, right? We're starting to see that on our distro, like our 10-day median range, meaning the most 50% of the time, like the last 10 days, our median range was 604. That's abnormal. So we know to trust at some point volatility will start contracting, right? Back to normalcy, right? Right now it's in anomaly land, and eventually it will contract to normalcy. That's where we'll weigh heavier, less on our 10-day median range and more on our session distro, which is a factor of 16 weeks, right? So the last 16 weeks worth of range, we'll start trusting this more than we trust the 10-day median. Right now, we don't trust the 16-week. We trust more of the 10-day median range because we know we're still in a state of volatility expanding, right? So looking at it today, right, and we do just simple steps. We know that from low to high, 10-day median range is 600 handles, which is kind of abnormal to talk about, but go look for yourself, right? So that's our typical 10-day range, right? We can do a simple test to see, are we overspending in these sessions or are we underspending to see if volatility is still expanding, right? Asia put in 252 handles, right? 1%. Over the last 16 weeks on a Thursday, it typically puts in half of that. So Asia overspent. London, which typically puts in, so let's put this to where it's supposed to be, 102. So this is what Asia typically spends over the last 16 weeks, right? It spent double that. London, right, typically spends 0.4 and it overspent as well. So volatility is still in a state of expanding. So we trust this 10-day median range over these. So now we can expect New York 1, which typically puts in 86, to overspend. So this would be over 86. This would be what normal looks like, but we expect abnormal. So to extend past this before expecting any reversion, right? Because we know we're in a state of volatility expanding, right? So now, and we talk all about volatility and all that stuff in the boot camp, right? So now we can see the typical market structure from 9:30 to 11:30 supports putting a high in and then drifting lower, right? So 10 o'clock should stack below 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock should stack below 10, and the 15-minute quarter should be instant highs in Q1 and Q4 lows, and et cetera, right? If live price cannot do the 4-step reversal, which we talked about, then we can definitely expect a more cleaner move to the upside until 10:30 and then going into a range. All right, so that is my war game for today, right? We trade every day live inside of the Discord. And if you are interested in this stuff, like join the boot camp. It's 3 months, right? Where we talk about how to read a live market, how to align it with historical data. um, how to build risk profiles, right, for measured moves, and how to build business